tangible character that you can use in your portfolio, your game, or in your movie. The first part is going to be anatomy, and the second part is going to be design. The correct anatomy is really going to ground the character in the real world. It's going to seem like it's an actual person who could exist in this world. It has the bone, muscles, fat, and skin that we'll get into in the building blocks chapter. But it's a boring character. It doesn't really look like an interesting character. It looks like a generic, realistic person, but it's not necessarily particularly interesting. And for that, we need the character design. That's what we have on the right, where you can see that the left one has all the correct stuff. It has all the muscles and all that. But the right one looks interesting and cool. So you can think about anatomy as an actor who has entirely neutral facial features. He feels grounded in reality, and his anatomy is correct. Like he's absolutely correct. He exists in this world, but he's still boring, and he lacks design. And you can think about design as like makeup, costume design. You could take the guy on the left here. This is more of an anatomy model, is missing the skin part on top. But you can take like this actor here, give him some prosthetics, you can give him like a big nose. You can do all these kind of things to him, and it's going to feel more interesting. You can give him in the makeup and costume department. You can give him like a big beard, and that's going to make him a lot more interesting. So I really find it to be helpful to break down your characters into these two parts. We're not really going to be focusing on design at all in this series. At least the main part is going to be on the anatomy. So often I find students to focus on the wrong thing. Instead of separating your work into anatomy and then design, it becomes this like mesh in the middle where it's you're trying to make the character look better, but you don't really know exactly what you should focus on. So you just kind of noodle around it. You just move some proportions up and down, and now you're doing the design at the same time as you're doing the anatomy. The advantage of working in at least mentally separating these into two separate stages is that, let's say you're working on this character here. And design is kind of applied anatomy in a sense. You're working on this guy here, and you want to make him look more interesting, maybe look more realistic. You could now just think about you just doing design. The only thing you worry about now is the design. You can like stretch his ear all the way out here, like move his brow down, or like make his eyes even smaller, or make his nose even bigger. There are a lot of things you can do here when it comes to the pure design. But you might have made the anatomy worse, and honestly that's fine, because now you just made a character look more interesting. And now later on you can go in and be like, okay, actually now we need to just like balance the shape out a little bit and just like make them more anatomical, and you can now like start to go in and refine things and make it look more realistic. So it's always like this, I wouldn't even say battle, but kind of a battle between the anatomy and the design. A lot of times as well, the design isn't really working, or rather you think the design isn't working. Well, in reality, you just need to go in and just like break up the anatomy a bit more. You just have to go in and really make sure that the anatomy feels like it's credible. So a lot of design issues I've found in students' work is really down to just refining the anatomy. So just being aware of these two stages is massively beneficial, because it means you can just simplify your workflow a lot. Again, we keep coming back to this, that anatomy is just really hard. Creating characters is just really hard. So by being aware that anatomy is a whole different stage from design is just very, very useful. Another part of anatomy versus design is also that one can be measured and the other one can't. Anatomy can be measured. You can very much have objectively good or bad anatomy. You could have a muscle that goes from here to here, but you placed it from here to here. That's just incorrect. And you can measure that. In theory, you could take a character, practice you can't do this, but in theory you could take a character, like a realistic human, and you could put them into like an MRI machine, a CT scan, all that kind of stuff, x-rays, and you would get 100% correct anatomy, and you could measure that. So meaning you could now in theory give yourself an anatomical score where are all the muscles in the correct spot, are the bones in the correct spot, and do they have the correct shape, is the skin looking natural, all those kind of things. You could very much give yourself an anatomical score. Anatomy is objective. Anatomy can be measured and can be falsified. You can say this is right or this is not right. Design, on the other hand, is not like falsifiable. You don't have objectively good or objectively bad designs, because at the end of the day, designs is all down to personal preference. You can have like the best character designs out there. Like, for instance, one of my favorites is if you see in Pan's Labyrinth, you have like the Fawn and Pale Man, I think it's called Paleface, and the designs are just, in my opinion, absolutely brilliant. And you're gonna have people who don't enjoy it. They just don't like those character designs, and that's totally fine. In the same way that you can have very, very simple stick figure designs that are brilliant in some people's eyes, and some people absolutely hate them. So this is important because it means that by focusing on anatomy, you can actually make the character more correct, and then you use design to make it interesting. But with the caveat that you can never make the perfect design. Design is always down to personal preference. Yes, we have a lot of tools for making the designs more interesting, like making the shapes cleaner and playing around proportions, not making the proportions too even, making, there are tons of tools we can use for this in terms of like costume design. You can make him just a lot more interesting in that regard, but it still doesn't mean that he's objectively better or worse. If you were to give this guy a hat, would that make him better or worse? Down to personal preference. Some people would like it, some people wouldn't. But if I were to take the muscle that goes from here down here and just remove it, that would be objectively wrong. Like, you could measure that and people could go, yep, we all agree that this is wrong. But the hat, entirely down to personal preference. So to sum it up, anatomy is objective. The quality can be measured, and that's one of the reasons we study it. And design is entirely subjective. You can't measure it, though, of course, there are tools to make it, quote unquote, better. People could agree that they prefer it, still wouldn't be objectively better. It would be subjectively better by a larger group. So yeah, these are the two main parts of Sculpt, and that's really beneficial to keep in mind when you're creating characters. On one side, you have anatomy, and on the other side, you have design.